All right, mates. It's seriously time to talk about Star Wars, the franchise that refuses to die, no matter how many reboots, spin-offs, and prequels we're force-fed. We love Star Wars, for two reasons. Firstly, it taught us humans can live in space before Elon Musk, and secondly, it gave us our first father-son bonding moment. Darth Vader finally got Luke face to face and said, "I am your father." Like, oh, thanks, Dad. Nothing says top-notch parenting like waiting until you're 5 minutes away from slicing my hand off to have the talk. Real hallmark moment. You'd think the Skywalkers have been through enough, but Disney's still digging for every last coin in the Tatooine sand. And with new shows like The Acolyte, which explores the Sith's troubled past as if they're misunderstood teenagers, it's clear this saga is just shambling on, zombie style. So here's the real and only question. Why is the curtain on Star Wars taking so long to drop? At one time, this was an epic of good versus evil, light versus dark, Jedi versus Sith. Now, we're watching the origin story of the origin story, hoping some new character in The Acolyte explains why space monks with laser swords are so darned miserable. It's like they're rewriting Star Wars as a therapy session. The Sith aren't evil. They're just really, really misunderstood. Oh, and let's throw in some family therapy too, because Disney heard we loved a good tragic backstory. And, while we're at it, let's talk about how every Jedi training arc boils down to a pep talk from a puppet in a swamp. Yoda, our wise green mascot of vague life advice, has been recycling the same 2 sentences for 40 years. Do or do not. There is no try. Inspiring? Maybe. Unhelpful? Absolutely. Somehow, though, this shallow advice is enough to send Luke from farm boy to galactic hero in what, the weekend? Meanwhile, poor Obi-Wan, Jedi mentor extraordinaire, spends his entire career trying not to notice his apprentice, Anakin, is a raging powder keg. But no Star Wars analysis would be complete without paying homage to the galaxy's top asthmatic supervillain, Darth Vader. Imagine, you're supposed to be the biggest menace in the galaxy, but you're literally shackled to a cape and a breathing apparatus. In this masterpiece of cinema, Mr. Who's Your Daddy spends half the movie hunting Luke like an overzealous dad at a Little League game. And when he finally gets his moment to bond, he chops off Luke's hand, because in the Skywalker family, catching up means dueling to the death. And just when you thought he couldn't get any darker, here's Emperor Palpatine, a hooded, wrinkly raisin with delusions of grandeur. It's the Sith, all right. Dark, mysterious, and dressing like they shop exclusively at Hot Topic Galactic Edition. Enter The Acolyte, Disney's latest spin-off and the dictionary definition of stretching it. Picture it. Sith apprentices brooding in dark caves, wrestling with angst like they're in a rejected Twilight plot. The show is basically a moody Sith-centric version of the real world, where instead of falling in love and causing drama, they're just mad about... what? A lack of career growth, being part of a Jedi Union without benefits. But it's not just The Acolyte. Disney has dug so deep into Star Wars that every new spin-off feels like watching an episode of House Hunters, where the buyers only want to rent. We had The Mandalorian, which was refreshing, until it became yet another nostalgia bomb with Grogu aging slower than George R.R. Martin's publishing schedule. What was once a simple, gritty bounty hunting story is now the galaxy's most expensive babysitting gig. You think Yoda was wise? Try babysitting this guy through the next 500 years of spin-offs, merch, and questionable plot lines. At this rate, Grogu will have his own trilogy before he's done potty training. Then we got The Book of Boba Fett, a series about a guy who's barely talked in his entire life, now given a full show to talk us into a coma. They're beating this franchise like a dead bantha, repackaging the same tired tropes and expecting us to fork over cash. You're watching not because you want to, but because it feels like your childhood owes it to them. And don't even get me started on the Sith fashion parade. Vader? Brooding and melodramatic, probably trying to hide the fact that his helmet fogs up every 5 minutes. Palpatine? Cackling away in a black hoodie, looking like he just crawled out of a dryer. And Disney will have you believe these are the scariest villains ever. But let's be real. They look like they're rehearsing for a community theatre production of Macbeth. And, of course, there's nostalgia, which I've been talking about a lot lately and I'll be talking about till infinity and fucking beyond. This is clearly Disney's favourite drug. Every new series, every spin-off, every single filler episode is built on the same recycled storylines. And Disney's banking on it. Remember that epic lightsaber duel? Now, it's an 8-part mini-series with a convoluted subplot about Jedi philosophy. And let's not forget the bounty hunters, who somehow went from villains to anti-heroes, because who doesn't love a good morally grey blaster wielder? Forget that you've seen it all before. They're hoping the force of nostalgia is strong enough to override your common sense. At some point, we have to ask, who's actually watching The Acolyte? Who's tuning in to learn about a bunch of people who couldn't make the cut at Jedi school? And while we're at it, who greenlit a series about younglings' traumatic Jedi training arcs? We're not learning anything new here, just rehashing the age-old idea that Jedi have no concept of therapy or emotional boundaries. In the end, Star Wars has become Disney's endless content machine, with each new installment just another installment in a story that should have wrapped up decades ago. We're not left with the epic saga that once enthralled us. Now, we've got a soulless, endless franchise that's more zombie than space opera. It's time, Star Wars. Time to retire, with dignity, or whatever dignity remains after Disney got hold of you. Because if we don't pull the plug now, I'm pretty sure the next series will be Darth Vader. The college years, complete with red lightsaber frat parties, or better yet, we'll be watching a Darth Vader cooking show by 2030. Ever wondered what it's like to make blue milk cheese? Neither did we, but that's apparently what's next on the menu. So, moral of the story, stop forcing the Force on us. We've had enough. Let our beloved Star Wars rest in peace before we find out what Ewoks do on their days off.